Good evening, colleagues. I call this meeting to order. We have a wonderful meeting ahead of us. Welcome to meeting number 25 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. As you know, tonight's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of June 23, 2022. We have members attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I'd like to make a few comments. As you all know, this is regarding Moonshot. For those who are new tonight, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating via video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. Interpretation for those on Zoom. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either English, French, or floor. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. And please use the raise hand function. I want you to know that all of our guests, our witnesses tonight, have completed the required connection tests in advance of the meeting. And I'd like to welcome Mr. Ruff tonight, who's joining us. And I'd like to welcome our witnesses. From the U15 group of Canadian Research Universities, we have Dr. Chad Gaffield, who's the Chief Executive Officer, and we welcome you. We're delighted you can join us. From the Ocean Frontier Institute, we have Dr. Anya Waite, Chief Executive Officer and Scientific Director. Thank you for joining us. We welcome you. And friends, we are trying to reach Sir Jeremy Farrar from the Wellcome Institute, who's traveling in Japan right now. So if we could, we will have 5-minute statements. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will hold this yellow card. It lets you know there's 30 seconds left, and I would ask that you wrap up then. And if we could, we'll begin with Dr. Gaffield. The floor is yours.
Bonsoir et un grand merci.
Good evening, and a big thank you for the invitation to join with you for this evening's meeting.
How energizing it has been to see the leadership of this standing committee addressing Canada's challenges and opportunities for building a better future through science and research. Your recommendations this year propose promising and urgently needed steps forward for Canada in what I think we all agree are turbulent times. In contributing to your work on international moonshot programs, I would like to focus on Canada's potential to play a leadership role in global research networks. My main conclusion, however, is that we cannot realize this potential without immediate action to respond to the rapidly increasing international competition in science and research. This international competition is particularly focused on the development of highly qualified talent through participation in world-class research projects in our leading universities. While all research projects aim for significant breakthroughs, discoveries, and insights, the development of talent in these research projects is the guaranteed result that is crucial in the short and long term, both domestically and internationally. Developing top talent in research projects not only gives Canada access to the global pool of knowledge, but also ensures a supply of the highly qualified individuals who can drive innovation across all sectors. As you know, the Canadian research community is among the most highly internationalized in the world. And not surprisingly, our granting agencies have pioneered promising models of international research funding in recent years. For example, the Transatlantic Partnership funding opportunity. Through that, Canada showed other national governments and funding agencies a way around the established position that money doesn't cross borders for academic research. The recent call for research on recovery, renewal, and resilience in a post-pandemic world brings together 16 humanities and social science research funding agencies from 12 countries in South America, North America, and Europe. Clearly, though, such sporadic initiatives must be elevated into a systematic national framework with structures and dedicated funding envelopes. The good news is that the advisory panel on the Federal Research Support System will soon be recommending governance and structural steps forward to support Canadian researchers in the global research enterprise and to propose mechanisms to incorporate multidisciplinary perspectives and practices to address global challenges in moonshot programs and related initiatives. The bad news is Canada is falling behind in having the funds to develop the required highly qualified talent through participation in research projects. Increasingly, those outside Canada are puzzled by the current level of federal support for for science and research in Canada. This past Friday, for example, Science Magazine, one of the world's top academic journals, had a headline lamenting that, quote, "In Canada, scientists are struggling with stagnant funding," unquote. The problem for Canada of stagnant funding is that the rest of the world is significantly increasing their investments based on the conviction that science and research must inform all efforts to confront global challenges. Most immediately, we must respond to what is happening south of the border. Over the next 5 years, the CHIPS and Science Act in the United States will essentially double the base budget of the National Science Foundation. This massive funding will put enormous additional pressure on Canadian universities as they struggle to compete for and retain top research talent and the best graduate students. This and similar initiatives in other countries demand our immediate attention. Canada now ranks at the bottom of G7 countries and those with graduate degrees. Moreover, Canada ranks only 28th among OECD countries in the proportion of our population with graduate degrees. In other words, our talent-based innovation ecosystem has great potential domestically and internationally, but it is operating at a scale that is too small for the challenging 21st century. In the case of international moonshot programs, Canada risks being overlooked as a partner when we have, in fact, the potential to play a global leadership role. Thank you very much, and I look forward to your questions and comments. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gatfield. We're very pleased to have you. And now, if we could go to Dr. Waite, and it'll be for 5 minutes, and we look forward to your testimony. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's my great pleasure to appear before the committee today, and thank you for this opportunity. The ultimate moonshot of this century is climate survival. Without climate mitigation, our future will be confined under the weight of many concurrent catastrophes: mass numbers of refugees, new human health crises, food security challenges, and ultimately a weakened economy and a weakened quality of life. The question that remains then is, how do we achieve this moonshot? How do we improve the lives of Canadians and support Canada to deliver an outsized impact for the world? Canada recognizes the critical importance of decarbonization to our planet and our nation's future. We're actively working towards net zero emissions by 2050. But that's simply not enough, not by a long shot. To reach our goal of climate survival, we need to get net negative, in fact. And today you'll hear about a new partnership between universities in Atlantic Canada and Quebec that will transform Canada's climate action. One important consideration in reaching net negative is that our climate solutions are currently focused on the uptake of carbon on land and the blue carbon sometimes stored within our coastal waters. But our research shows that these carbon sinks are simply a drop in the bucket. They are just not enough. More than 90% of carbon is actually stored in the ocean, the majority of which is located in the high seas beyond national jurisdiction, known as deep blue carbon. If we really want to make an impact on the global carbon budget, which is the only way to save the world from itself, we must turn our attention to deep blue carbon and the emerging science of ocean-based carbon dioxide removal, or CDR. This includes an innovation of a suite of technologies, many Canadian-born, that could take carbon from the atmosphere and safely sequester it in the deep sea. Canada actually has the opportunity to bring meaningful climate leadership in this area. Deep blue carbon and ocean-based CDR, carbon dioxide removal, represent a potential global climate solution. Committing to this solution will encourage research investment right here at home, while providing both environmental and economic benefits to Canada. It will also give us information about the timescales of climate change and how the ocean is responding, which help us frame up the social adaptation that our communities need to address the current global climate crisis. For example, sea level rise, drought, and catastrophic hurricanes, all of these directly are related to the ocean and the ocean's impact on our climate. So the reason this is a moonshot is because it will require a huge lift of support. Research generally progresses slowly, and this needs to move quickly. In fact, it needs to move very fast. There are ocean CDR practitioners with huge amounts of capital to put towards this effort, but they are looking to us for guidance on how to use it effectively. Strategic and sustained ocean observation and ocean and climate science synthesis is a major gap that must urgently be addressed. We need a system that can monitor what is happening in the ocean in real time, which would enable improved climate forecast, better climate mitigation methods, and facilitate what has the promise to be $1 trillion deep blue carbon credit market. One solution proposed by us at the Ocean Frontier Institute is an ocean carbon observatory that would bring nations together to frame this problem properly and to help implement a collective solution, a regional exemplar or example in the North Atlantic. We are already revving this engine with the recent submission of Dalhousie University's Transforming Climate Action proposal. And this is a joint initiative with Université de Québec à Rimouski, Memorial University of Newfoundland, and Université Laval, to the Canada First Research Excellence Fund. And this proposal represents a groundbreaking alliance between French and English-speaking ocean-focused institutions. So let's recap. The moonshot of our time is climate survival. It requires increased ocean observation of deep blue carbon beyond national jurisdiction and the safe implementation of ocean-based carbon dioxide removal technologies at scale, which only the ocean can offer. There is an urgent need for a moonshot type program that can enable transformative global initiatives that transcend the priorities of individual regions and individual departments, mandates, and government. We have less than 8 years to avoid a future shaped by climate catastrophe, and every day the global climate crisis clock is ticking. This is where we need to put our energy.
Waite, I hate
if not now, when?
Dr. Waite, thank you for your testimony. Thank you. You have a very interested committee. I know they'll want to ask questions. Thank you to both our witnesses. And I'll just let our committee know there's been connections difficulties with Japan, and so we will have 2 witnesses for this panel. But we thank Sir Jeremy Farrar for trying so hard. We're now going to go to a round of questions, and we begin tonight with Mr. Soroka for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for coming this evening. I'll start my questions with Dr. Gaffield. You brought up a lot of things that we've dealt with in the past about retaining top talent here, and you're talking about the loss of it going to other countries, especially now potentially the United States, and I have to admit my family is one of them as well. Now, my question is, how can we actually avoid this from happening? And you talked about funding. What kind of funding do we need, as well as what kind of research facilities do we need to build as well?
Thank you very much for your question. My sense is that one of the things that's been overlooked in recent years is what I like to think about as the guaranteed ROI, return on investment, of research, and that is this development of talents. In other words, well, we hope in our projects that we have breakthroughs and so on. The real benefit in terms of the kind of ongoing, enduring value of those projects is the people that we produce out of them that end up leading across society. And so I think sometimes, and I think in recent years, there's been a little bit of an emphasis on projects making new discoveries, which is great when they do. But what's happened now is Canada has really let itself fall behind in terms of those individuals who can really help us drive innovation across all sectors. And I think one of the things that is really important in this is the fact that, while Canada is often criticized for having, for example, a low level of business innovation, business expenditures on R&D and so on for innovation, I think it's only in recent years, the last few, that competitive pressure is now across all sectors. In my sense, all sectors now are attempting to adjust to this new world, a world in which we're driving toward net zero, a world, I think, in which we're driving toward really handling far more appropriately in a very, very complex way the digital technologies. We've learned now that the digital transformation is I think, a really complex phenomena that underpins all aspects, and it's not simply a good thing, and we have to learn all sorts of aspects of handling that and optimizing it well. So my sense is every business, every institution now is trying to move towards sustainability, is trying to embrace a digitally enabled making that happen.
So, Dr. Gaffield, do you think that by addressing more money, maybe even more facilities or something to bring in, like I know Stem Cell we had last week, and they were saying that they're forefront leaders in the world on that area. So we've got a couple areas where we might be leaders, but yet it doesn't seem like we're very good at leading when you're talking about how far we've fallen behind. So what more can we do then? The commercialization is great, but at the same time, money, we're not coming close to what other countries are doing. So that's my concern.
Emphasizing the facilities, I think, is really important, because one of the things we found that the leaders in many fields emerge out of these serious research facilities that are connected to these global networks. And that was one of the things, the story that gets told often during the pandemic, was the fact that when Canada was realizing that we didn't have a domestic capacity in terms of the vaccine production, what happened? Well, they were quickly worked through our researchers to international context to find those elsewhere who could then link with us and so on to really help us get the support we needed to either choose the vaccines we're going to buy and then eventually to attract Moderna to Canada. But that's just one example. So it seems to me that yes, it's great to have some sectors that are real leaders, but we need that really across the board, because there's no aspect. When we think about farming, for example, you think about agriculture, that industry is transforming itself now and is just as, I think, in need of the top talent as any other sector. It really is a transformational change for Canada. And I think when Canada decided to move on what I think about as a talent-based innovation system, we need to really realize that we need a far greater investment if that's going to realize its potential.
Actually, you had mentioned about the vaccines, and I know that in the University of Alberta, through the virology department, they actually were developing a vaccine at the time, and they had to put a bid in if they were successful because they were very close to developing a new vaccine, but yet the government did not choose them. So do you think that's also one of the problems, is that there isn't the support from the government when they are getting these breakthroughs?
Well, one of the difficulties, I think, is that we're not allowed to the funds are not allowing us to make a sufficient number of investments in terms of the possibilities. I mean, one of the things that's really important, I think, is that the old idea of you can't just put all your eggs in one basket. We need many, many centers across this country to help us in all the places we need it.
Where I think, Dr. Garfield, because you represent so many universities, that's great opportunity for you bringing more unique sciences to the table, because there's so many areas that need to be discovered. And as actually Dr. Wade had even talked about the climate crisis, there's so much with carbon sequestration.
Mr.
And
Soroka,
the
I
chair
hate
is telling
to
me
do
to
this to
be
you,
quiet.
and you're just getting going. I can see how interested you are. Thank you, Mr. Soroka. And now,
any information, I'd be appreciative of that.
okay, Mr. Soroka has requested a written response to what he was saying. Thank you,
you.
Mr. Soroka. And with that, we will go to Ms. Bernard at Ms. Bradford for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And welcome to both of our witnesses. So thank you so much for joining us and talking about this very exciting topic tonight. So, Mr. Gaffield, the U15 group of Canadian Research Universities, an organization representing Canada's most research-intensive universities. Its 15 member institutions undertake 80% of all competitive university research in Canada, rank among the world's premier institutions, and conduct about $8.5 billion worth of research annually. So very impressive. What role do universities play in moonshot programs?
Thank you very much for that question. It seems to me that one of the opportunities we have now as a result of what you mentioned is that I think Canada could really play a leadership role in the world. The challenges that we're facing have what we might think about as domestic articulations of them, but they're global. But Canada, I think, has a possibility, given its history and a few things I can mention, that we could actually offer at some level to convene a global research effort. And I think the example of oceans that my colleague was suggesting, I think, is one example of that. And in fact, Canada does play a real leadership role. It seems to me that Canadian, on the world stage, what I've noticed is that Canadian leadership is often welcomed. We're seen as good chairs of international research teams. We're seen as very effective leaders in terms of mobilizing diverse interests and finding often what you might think about as the sweet spot in collaborations to really advance quickly and so on. So it seems to me the opportunity for us now is to take some of our strengths, which I don't think are even now at the scale we need, but have some potential. But if we offer that internationally, I think then we can leverage, I think, from around the globe. And that's why it's exciting, and we're hopeful to see, for example, Canada's negotiations finish with Horizon Europe, which I think would be a great thing. But there's a big world now, and there are opportunities for us around the world. So it seems to me that if Canada, as part of its moonshot thinking, were to say, you know what, let's really try to make an outsized contribution to the world's problems. And we have some, I think, contributions to make. And frankly, given the importance of climate change and given the importance of this digital transformation, I think we have some strengths that position us well to play those global leadership convening roles. So I think my sense, at least, is that it's enormous potential, and our challenge is to say, okay, what can we do systematically to move us there?
So that kind of leads into my next question. So thank you for that. So, what structures and supports help encourage cooperation between universities, federal government, provincial governments, and the private sector in the development and deployment of ambitious research programs?
One of the things that we've seen recently is, and it's interesting, it's not even remarked internationally. When Canada 25 years ago was thinking about what it was going to do in terms of higher education, at the time in the 90s, Canada had an okay domestic higher education system, but it had kind of moved from where it had been in the 60s, where it was really still Canada was very much importing almost everything. By the 90s, we had a pretty good domestic, and there was a debate in Canada about, okay, we're facing this new century. It had talked already about climate change. It was talking about digital. How are we going to face this? And there was a debate. Do we import it, or do we buy it or make it? Do we have to do it ourselves, or can we import it? And the decision was that if we were not in the global effort in terms of research and science, that we wouldn't even know what to import, that we had to be part of that global effort. And Canada decided that it was going to do it through investing in talent, and that's why it built the Canada Research Chairs Program. It built a whole series, and the facilities and so on, as our other member was saying earlier. So my sense, at least, is that the question now for us is to say, okay, we've gotten it so that in a number of areas we're on the world stage. We have some access to the global pool of knowledge and so on, but what are we going to do to take it to that next level? How are we going to move it now into, and especially now since the private sector is moving toward innovation very rapidly in all sectors. The competitive pressure is everywhere. Innovation is in the public sector, private sector, nonprofit sector, everywhere. They're collaborating. And our universities, given the strategy that was developed years ago and has continued, have deep links with their communities and with businesses. And this is unique in many ways internationally. Not many universities, I was talking to colleagues in Europe, and actually recently someone who was visiting Israel was being asked, how come those universities in Canada are so connected with the private sector, with their communities and so on? It's very unusual. In other countries, they build separate institutions over here that are not connected to the main universities. And this turns out to be, I think, a real strength for Canada because as your committee has been studying this year, it is really the circulation of people. It's the talented people moving across campus, moving into the communities, into companies and back and so on that we're comfortable with.
And Ms. Bradford, I'm sorry to interrupt. Thank you to you both. And now we're going to go to Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and welcome to our witnesses for today's study. My first question is with Mr. Garfield. It's a pleasure to see you and to meet you for the first time. We had your predecessor appear before us, Mr. Patry, and so it's a pleasure to see you here this evening. I think that it was quite clear from your opening remarks. You referred to funding which is stagnant and that it's impossible to reach our own potential due to a lack of funding. Now, you were quite clear about this, and you referred to the universities, and the organisation you represent conducts about 80% of research work in Canada. It's very important to bear in mind what you have to say to us today. So my first question, of course, will be about funding. You alluded to, and I think that caught my attention, and that is that the United States in the next 5 years, the major funding will double its funding, in fact. And Canada is the only G7 country in the past 6 years that has lost researchers. So I'm trying to get a handle on this. How is it possible for Canada to propose bold moonshot projects if we won't be able to keep our talent pool here at home and enable them to reach their full potential due to a lack of funding? Response. Well, thank you very much for the for the question. There is no doubt whatsoever that currently in Canada we are, to a certain extent, at peril. Now, the future that we are to expect is a dire one. We are going to tumble on the hierarchy of the world stage, and not just in relation to the United States, also the Europeans and the Chinese, who are increasingly focusing on science as the underpinnings of their future.
There's been a lot of emphasis in Canada recently on the fact that the United States has embarked on a really aggressive Inflation Reduction Act. But they actually did last summer two things. But right before they did the Inflation Reduction Act, they did the CHIPS and Science Act. And those two go together. They clearly have a two-pronged attack where there's going to be significant development in terms of a whole variety infrastructure, a whole variety of aspects of the United States and their transformation, but it's all going to be driven by a serious thrust in terms of research and science. So it seems to me this is sending a clear signal that in terms of building a better future in the world, those geopolitical borders are going to be really important. And it's interesting because, you know, it wasn't that long ago that we were being told all the time about globalization and that the role of all countries now would be to just be part of these global networks and chains and supply chains and so on. And, you know, there was even a debate about, you know, the end of geopolitical borders, right? That we wouldn't have to worry about. There's all this great transcontinental this great globalized forces. But it turns out that geopolitical borders make a big difference. Et même au Québec, on voit ça.
And we see this even in Quebec. I think that the Research Council of Quebec is working in a complementary way to the federal initiatives. And this is an advantage, to my mind, a collaborative approach. From a federal standpoint, that this kind of collaboration would be great with other provinces, that is, research funds that would help bolster Canada. Now, federal leadership in Canada is key.
The fact that Canada, we're now having this conversation, we can say, in fact, that Canada has some strengths, and we have the possibility to play a leadership role globally. That's thanks to federal leadership starting in the 1990s and being pretty consistent ever since. The difficulty is the international competition has just been getting greater and greater. And I think we've maybe taken for granted a little bit, and we read it a lot, Canada's got a great post-secondary system, isn't it wonderful? And in fact, you know, in Canada, it's not like that. We don't like to pat ourselves on the back, and we shouldn't here. We should say, look, we have work to do. The international competition's intense. We have to double down. And that's why I think your committee is so important to have at the parliamentary level, the federal level, a concerted effort to say, listen, we've got to get much more serious about this.
Merci, M. Garfield. Vous parlez.
Thank you very much. You referred to leadership and being competitive on the world stage. Currently, Canada is 18th of the 24 OECD countries in terms of GDP investment in research and development. It's the only G7 country that's reduced its investment in research and development between 2000 and 2020. What direction should this government take? Invest in moonshot, bold programs, or catch up and make up for what's been lost over the recent years in terms of research and development? Response. Well, I think you're talking about two sides of the same issue here. Were Canada to invest at a core level? I'm sorry, Mr. Blanchet-Joncar, says the chair.
Perhaps, since you didn't get much of a chance to answer, perhaps Monsieur Blanchet-Joncar would like a written answer to that. Thank you to you both.
Yes, a written response, please.
And now we will go to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. And I'd like to continue with Dr. Gaffield on that line. You talked about how Canada's falling behind. I know in terms, you mentioned the number of Canadians with advanced degrees. I think, as I recall, Sweden, I think 3% of Swedes have PhDs, and it's less than 1% of Canadians, and Germany's at 2%. So we're falling behind there. And, you know, one of the things we've been hearing about at this committee and elsewhere in the House is that we are, you know, the Tri-Council funding for graduate students hasn't been raised since 2003. And so many are being lured or forced away to get their graduate studies elsewhere. You know, they're living in poverty here. And I'm just wondering if you think that's an important, it may not obviously be the entire problem here, but is that something that we should, one of the things that we should fix sooner than later?
Yes, and I think it's, thank you very much for that question. And it's actually a bit humbling for us to think about the fact that we arrived at this point and we're surprised to learn that the level hadn't increased since 2003-04. But to me, that's a little bit of a sign that we weren't looking. We weren't paying attention to that. And so that's, I think you're putting your finger on part of the phenomena where if you think about the notion of Canada's decision to build a talent-based innovation system, like producing those people that we really need to drive innovation across all society, to have access to the global pool of knowledge and so on, I think it shows that we really lost focus there in terms of that pretty basic, when we think of a pretty basic item. But what's happens as well, it's kind of by not paying, those students obviously, though, are just a small proportion of all the graduate students. They're a small proportion. So where do the rest of them get funding? It's through research projects. About half, at least half of all the research funds given for research projects go to people. They're paying research assistants, they're paying graduate students, and so on. That's where that you're really investing in people. And I think that one of the things that is really important for us to think about is it's embarrassing for us that those fellowship levels are the same. But the punchline is, if we fix that, it's just really going to be a small aspect of that larger issue of what is the effort, the investment being put in those leaders for society that we need for this transformational change that our society is undergoing.
You mentioned the CHIPS and Science Act, which I think is about $280 billion. How does that stack up with what we spend in Canada on science? And, I guess I'm trying to think, what would the federal government have to put up to compete with that from a Canadian standpoint? I know we're only 10% of the population. But.
Well, again, I'd be happy to provide the calculation behind this, but we've have a calculation which says roughly to get us, and I think, as Monsieur Blanchet was saying earlier, to get us kind of a catch-up here would be $1 billion a year. So it's a bit. Now, on the other hand, when we think about what are the ways in which we can really help Canada build a better future and help all sectors, all aspects of our country, from coast to coast to coast, $1 billion is I think a good investment.
Well, okay, with a minute and a half, I'll go to Dr. Waite and the Ocean Frontier Institute. I'm really curious about this carbon dioxide removal, and I'll just give you a minute and a half to talk about the how and the timeline involved. I know little about carbon dioxide. Is this being stored in the water, or is this being stored in the sea floor? Just give you a little more time to expand on that.
Sure. There's a whole number of technologies and techniques that are being used right now and developed here in Canada, and we're hoping to do some coastal and deep ocean test beds. This is an area where Canada can take leadership. We've been asking them to do so through the G7, for example, where we believe that if nations joined across the Atlantic in a bit of a space station model, like an ocean space station, you could actually lift the global performance really strongly. And this is a place where acceleration, we have connection to industry, we have a very strong graduate student pool out of proportion to our size, and Canada can really hit above its weight here. So it might be a place to start to show the world what we can do. We're hitting above our weight in the ocean stage anyway. And now if we do a major initiative in the North Atlantic, we'll be right up there with what the US, UK, France, and Germany, we'd be doing more than they're doing already. So the carbon is stored in the sea floor, in the deep sea, in the animals and plants, and in the root systems in the sea floor. And different techniques enhance those storage depots in different ways.
My apologies for interrupting. thank you to both our witnesses. This is just, it's really interesting discussion. We're now going to go to our 5-minute round, and this time we're going to Mr. Mazur.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Gaffield, you mentioned in answering Mr. Soroka here, mentioned how there was in agriculture, there was a need to keep top talent. What did you mean by that?
My sense is, you know, I'd be happy to connect with experts in this field. But what we've been learning, I think, is that the transformation in the world of agriculture is occurring like in all sectors. There's no question about it. And we have major research projects underway in terms of all sorts of the agribusiness world now. And so it seems to me that one of the things that Canada should embrace is the fact that we have a very diversified country. We have all sorts of strengths, and it seems to me that showing world leader innovation in agriculture should be one of the ones that we really aspire to and treat as a real priority for. And when I think about our institutions, whether it's in Saskatchewan or elsewhere, we know that, or in fact, in many corners of our country now, we're learning that there are important transformations in terms of how we ensure food security that are world leading. And I think we have an opportunity to play the same kind of global leadership role that I'm suggesting in other fields, I think in agriculture.
I think as far as in the balance of everything we have to research in Canada, we can research in Canada, you think agriculture should take a more prominent role in studying agriculture?
Well, food security internationally, globally now, I think is a real issue, and how to optimize the potential of land, how to optimize the potential in terms of everything from production to distribution networks and so on. It seems to me that there's some real paradigm shifting thinking and practice going on now, and it seems to me that Canada is just as well situated in agriculture as in other fields, and I think even taking advantage of, for example, AI and other sorts of strategies. And this is happening already in our leading industries, and they're important research projects that have certainly got my attention in terms of our possibility for global research leadership.
You mentioned it earlier about being the bottom of G7 countries for graduate students. I guess, and then we've heard many times in this study as well as about the draining of people down to the United States. If there was, besides the $1 billion, besides everybody wants money, right? Money makes the world go around, but what else? Like, what one thing could we do besides money to really make us more competitive here in Canada for those graduate students, so we would stop the bleeding, stop those people from leaving our country?
Well, when I think about one of the things I just am so proud to have a chance to contribute to Canadian higher education is that I think the research ecosystem we have built, the innovation ecosystem we have built over the last 25 years, I think has some very, very serious strengths that have proven to be, I think, even more important than even has been imagined along the way. For example, earlier we were talking about the links that our universities have with surrounding communities, private, public, nonprofit sectors, that kind of links. I mean, we've never, ever in Canada talked about ivory towers and so on. I like the fact that we have such a strong public system. I like the fact that we have access to the top talent. We're able to do it. We definitely need policy changes that we've been working on. We need to do better in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion, indigenization. We have, there are a lot of policy work underway now that we've embarked on. We have a ways to go.
One short question. is it more expensive to do research in Canada than it is in the United States? Like, is there one thing is like between paying for our carbon tax and the universities have to pay, those students that have to pay for heating their homes, like is the cost more in Canada for a person to do research than it is in the United States or any other country?
I haven't heard that. I haven't seen comparisons like that. My sense is that the top talent is attracted to Canada when they have the facilities, when they can get the support.
I'm sorry to interrupt, gentlemen. Mr. Mazur, would you like a written answer on that
Yeah,
one?
that'd be great.
Okay,
That'd be really
thank you, Dr. Gaffield. Thank you for being all of you, our two witnesses, so gracious with your time and expertise. And we're now going to go to Ms. Diab for 5 minutes, please.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair, and let me as well thank both of our witnesses here this evening for taking the time to contribute to our study. Dr. Wade, it's lovely to see you again. I know in September 2016, I remember actually, I was thrilled to be there at the original funding announcement for the Ocean Frontier Institute at Dalhousie University. My recollection at the time, Scott Bryson was the Minister of Treasury Board, and he was there representing Government of Canada, and I was there actually as a representative of the provincial government, and $94 million, I believe, is what Canada contributed at the time, and great support from Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, PEI, and a number of other partners and so on. Was another $125 million. So, that showed a wonderful example of how governments at different levels, but also universities, national, international research partners can collaborate and work together. So my question to you is this. We're talking about Moonshot and the extraordinary efforts that it took years ago to get mankind to the moon and the immense scientific spin-off that came from those voyages. I guess I'm curious, what would you say to the claims that we know more about space than we know about the deep sea? And I'm going to take you to your deep blue carbon. I wrote that down. Taking carbon from the atmosphere and storing it in the deep sea. It sounds to me we have a long way to go. So can you speak to us about that and the value of researching the ocean floor with the same ambition that people researched space years ago? Probably still do.
Yeah, look, thank you very much. And thanks for the reminder of that great funding that the Ocean Frontier Institute received. And I have to say, that scale of funding is transformative. Our community is completely different now than it was in 2016. We are a group of, it's absolutely exploding here in terms of the intellectual intensity, in terms of the connectivity with industry and government, and we are becoming a big international hub for graduate student training. And I just wanted to endorse and support my colleague, Dr. Gaffield, with his comments on graduate student training being so critical. The deep sea is a huge unknown. It is absolutely the place where most of the carbon in the world sits. And that means that technologies can pull more carbon there. So they can do that by sinking things like kelp and plankton down into the deep sea. They can chemically change the ocean so that it absorbs more carbon. They can do that by putting what they call alkalinity, or sort of the opposite of acidity, into the ocean and then sinking that water. These technologies are underway. They're being tested here in Halifax. They're being tested in teacups, in tanks, in embayments now. And what we need is regulatory movement so that we can start to test these technologies broadly and scientifically in a really robust way. We had a philanthropist say to us a couple of months ago, I have $923 million to put into buying carbon credits. We want blue chip credits. And that means scientifically robust measurement of carbon sinks in the ocean. And we are revving this up, but research is relatively slow, and we need to be fast because the ocean is moving, the industry is moving super, super quickly. Regulation is moving a little bit more slowly than that. So we have people working on the London Protocol. We are working provincially and federally to see what we can do in terms of regulation. And then we need the research to just be revved as quickly as it can be to support these massive venture capitalists. After the Economist Ocean Tech Summit in Halifax a couple of months ago, we were flooded in our offices with venture capitalists coming in and saying, where can we invest, build these blue chip carbon futures, and we will come. So we're super excited about this. Would not be possible without that investment in the Ocean Frontier Institute that started in 2016. So when the government of Canada invests intensively in one sector, you get a lift in that sector that can be globally transformative. And we can do this in the ocean. We need more.
So the type of spin-offs that you've been talking about, aside from the potential climate spin-offs, what other spin-offs? I'm thinking aquaculture, fishing, can you comment on those?
Yeah, huge. So first of all, quantum. So we're seeing big shifts in the use of
Dr. Wade?
moving depth. Oh,
I'm sorry to do this. I have the worst job. I hear this great testimony, and I'm the one who has to interrupt. I'm sorry. Ms. Diab, would you like a written answer from
Yes,
Dr.
please.
Wade?
Thank you.
Thank you
And
both.
thank you very much.
Thank you both for being so gracious. We will now go to Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca for 2.5 minutes, please.
Madame la Présidente, je vais adresser mes prochaines questions.
Thank you very much. My next question is for Mr. Gaffield. We learned in a previous study that about 15 universities got about 75% of funding for research. So bold investments require huge investment. So I'm trying to understand what effect does this have on the balance of funding and the competition between very large universities and mid-sized ones? Response. Well, the fact of the matter is that we need strong universities across Canada. That much is clear. But it's just as clear that we do need pillars, if you would, to advance and promote research. So there's a dual problem here. The issue is the size of the investment. Ideally speaking, we'd have enough money to go around to enable all universities across all regions of Canada to conduct research.
Strengths of Canada is we have really strong universities across the country, but at the level of financing we currently have, there's no doubt that the access to it is going to, par la force des choses, be limited. And it seems to me that the key is, and I think our leading universities do this, and I think the case of the oceans with under the leadership of Dalhousie is that they involve other universities are in the region. And so I think ideally what we'll be moving toward is kind of clusters across the country. And I think this is increasingly the case where we can have good connections, good collaborations between smaller, mid-sized, larger universities, all of which are optimizing their own strengths to make an even greater collective effort. So my sense is that that inevitably we need leading universities at the same time as I think we need that diversity. And I think certainly 15 is never enough for a country like Canada. We need, in fact, 15 perhaps hubs, regions in which all our universities are actively contributing. But that is going to take a much larger investment.
Thank you.
Kat, je suis désolée.
I'm terribly sorry to cut you off.
I didn't catch.
Inaudible? I had a couple of seconds left, in my opinion.
Come check. I'm very careful. Very careful. I want to treat everyone carefully and honestly. Thank you, Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca. And now we'll go to Mr. Cannings for 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, thank you. I'm going to continue with Dr. Gaffield. And you mentioned how you were talking about global research networks and how moonshots are kind of necessarily international in scope. Just wondering if we want to expand on that and maybe use our experience with vaccine production, as an example, Canada didn't have any domestic production, how we changed that and how we could perhaps even make that better so that we do have adequate domestic production, but just how that whole international ecosystem works in science.
I mean, it's such an important question, and as an historian, I always try to understand these things historically, and that's why I focus on this debate in the mid-1990s, because they asked that question. They said, okay, Canada is a small country. We're obviously not going to be self-sufficient in everything, so what do we do? And it was this solution, the kind of answer to that question was to say, okay, we're going to ensure ourselves domestic self-sufficiently in certain areas, but then we're going to work hard such that we have access to and we're connected to everything else internationally, and we can call upon it. And I think it's that access to that international pool of expertise, of capacity, and so on, I think that really requires people that are actively part of these networks, these global networks. It's so much of this is really an effort to tap into a global network of people. And so in the case of the vaccine production and the immediate need, I mean, there were these two questions. On the one hand, we need to buy a lot of vaccines. We need to acquire a lot of vaccines. And at the moment, we don't know what to buy. At that time, it was not obvious. There were dozens of potential candidates. So you had to have experts who were able to look at the global possibilities and say, okay, let's focus on, I think the way it worked, there was the committee said 6, and 5 of the 6 ended up being the top ones that in fact saved Canada and saved countries around the world. So you need that's the first level of these networks paying off. The second one was in terms of the actual production that led to Canada's attraction of Moderna, where we say, you know what?
Dr. Gaffield, I'm
Thank you.
sorry. I have to be fair to everyone. I want to thank Dr. Waite and Dr. Gaffield for coming and sharing their time, their expertise, and I want to thank our committee for a really interesting discussion. And I will thank Sir Jeremy, who tried very hard to join us as well. We thank our witnesses. We hope it's been a good experience for you, and we hope you'll come back.
The best time of my experience this year. So thank you. I really, really, merci beaucoup. Je suis très reconnaissant. Merci.
I'm very grateful. Thank you.
Colleagues suspended.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, I'll call us back to order. We're so pleased to welcome a new set of witnesses. J'aimerais faire quelques observations.
I'd like to make a couple of observations for the benefit of the next panel. Before I give you the floor, please wait till I recognize you, and if you're participating over Zoom, please click on the mic icon to activate your microphone. Please mute yourself when you don't have the floor. As far as interpretation is concerned, for those participants on Zoom, you have a choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Now, I'd like to welcome our witnesses.
We're so pleased to welcome our next panel for Moonshot. À titre personnel, we have Dr. Guy Rouleau, Directeur Institut. Yeah, bienvenue.
Welcome.
From BioCanRx, we have Dr. Stephanie Michaud, President and Chief Executive Officer, and Dr. John Bell, the Scientific Director. Welcome to you both. And coming back again to us, we're so pleased, from the Canadian Nuclear Laboratories, we have Joseph McBurty, the President and Chief Executive Officer. I'd like to welcome all the witnesses. Each group will have 5 minutes to present. At the 4.5-minute mark, I will hold up a yellow card. It lets you know that you have 30 seconds left, and I hope you'll wrap up. And we aim to be fair. And with that, if we could start with Dr. Rouleau, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup. This opportunity to come and present to your committee. So I'm going to talk about the brain, and I'm going to make the arguments that our brains are our greatest wealth and Canada's greatest wealth, because the brains are what allow us to do everything. And there are many diseases of the brain, and I think that that is something that interests all Canadians. And just to be clear, all neurodevelopmental diseases that affect the brain, intellectual disability, autism, etc., 5 to 7% of the population of Canada, all neurodegenerative diseases that include dementia, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, etc., and also all psychiatric diseases and all mental illness come from the brain. And so it's quite clear that there's no Canadian who is not affected directly or indirectly by brain diseases. And I want to say that, I've been in this field for a long time, and the cardiologists have been doing a great job, and heart disease is declining. Survival is increasing, so I think that's great. I think the oncologists are also doing a great job, but oncology is complicated. It's many different diseases. So there you have many cancers that can be either controlled or cured. There's still work to do, I will admit. But for one organ, we've really not done very well, and that's the brain. There is no drug that reliably slows down the progress of dementia. There's virtually no drugs that can be used to treat the core problems and autism, intellectual disability, so on and so forth. And the drugs that we use in psychiatric illnesses are blunt instruments. So why is this? Well, really, the problem is that the brain is very complicated. And this is why I think we've not been doing so well. You need to understand the system to be able to design smart treatments. And we don't know the system well enough. The good news, though, is that the brain, there's like these revolutionary methods, and I could go into details about them, but there are new methods, single cell sequencing, there's imaging, there's AI, and iPSCs, many different methods and techniques that have now made studying the brain much easier and much more possible. And in Canada, there is a very large, very vibrant, very strong, we punch well above our weight in the world, neuroscience community. And not only that, Canada, the neuroscience community in Canada is quite unified. And in Canada, there's collaboration. There's a lot of collaboration. A lot of people work together. And I think that it is exactly the kind of conditions that you would like to have for what you would call a moonshot. So you want to have a large-scale collaboration. You want to have a strong cadre of experts and people who are opening up the field. I heard a little earlier about the brain drain to the United States. I can tell you that in the neurosciences, it's kind of the brain drain is kind of going in the other direction. We've just hired a few superstars from the United States who come to Canada because Canada is a good place to work, to collaborate, and people work together. So this is my message. My message is that the brain is something that is super important. It's something that where we are very, very strong in Canada, and it's somewhere where we could make a big difference in understanding and in finding treatments for the brain. So if I do less than 5 minutes, do I get the extra time later?
Thank you, Dr. Rouleau, and thank you for joining us this evening. We will now go to BioCanRx, and the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to be back on the committee tonight. My name is Stephanie Michaud, and I'm joined by our Scientific Director, Dr. John Bell, known worldwide for his development of immunotherapy for cancer treatment. Together, we work closely with partners from multiple sectors, all aligned with our ambitious vision to transform all cancers into curable diseases.
The word moonshot, it is often prefaced by the word cancer, reflecting the undisputable reach of this disease that affects 1 in 2 Canadians and leads to the death of 1/4 of our population, a number that is increasing as we speak due to pandemic-related delays. There is the cost, $26.2 billion in 2021 alone, $4.8 billion of that amount representing the direct out-of-pocket costs that are borne by cancer patients and their families. Cancer is a grand challenge for Canadians anchored in unaddressed real-world needs. This fits the Brookfield Institute's definition laid out in Canada's Moonshot, as previously noted by other witnesses to this committee. The US and the EU are treating cancer as a moonshot, investing significant sums of money and setting ambitious goals to move the needle. Canada has also invested in a mission-oriented type of approach, albeit at a much smaller scale, with BioCanRx. With Canada's support, BioCanRx is tackling one of Canada's wicked problems, the lack of coordination and support for translational research and biomanufacturing. In so doing, Canada's investment has allowed BioCanRx to achieve remarkable success in the development of novel immunotherapies and deliver results for Canadian patients today.
As I'm sure you can appreciate from the work your committee has already done to date, the hallmarks of a successful Moonshot program include building cross-disciplinary teams of thought leaders, creating a nimble, independent decision-making body that manages a portfolio of innovative projects with clearly defined deliverables, and providing transformative and multi-year funding. With these concepts in mind, in 2015, we created BioCanRx, a network of centers of excellence, to develop, test, and provide Canadian cancer patients novel, effective treatments for cancer. Our focus was on the burgeoning field of immunotherapy, which uses strategies to train a patient's own immune system to recognize their cancer as foreign and destroy cancers within their body. We built upon the world-class science being developed in Canada and existing Canadian infrastructure to build an innovative research program moving a portfolio of Canadian discoveries into products that can be provided to Canadian patients in need. The BioCanRx translational research engine is nimble, able to respond to discoveries made around the world in a fast-moving field of cancer immunotherapy. And one example is the development of personalized engineered immune cells, or so-called CAR T cells. In 2017, BioCanRx started a cross-country Made in Canada CAR T program, and by 2019, we were treating Canadian patients who otherwise would have no access to this innovative cancer treatment. With her permission, I want to tell you the story of Camille Leahy, a 37-year-old single mother in Newmarket, Ontario, who was diagnosed with leukemia at the beginning of the pandemic. She received an aggressive chemotherapy regimen that failed her. She was followed by a grueling stem cell transplant that also failed her. She was essentially at end of life with no other therapeutic options available to her. Camille enrolled in our Biocanix-sponsored Made in Canada CAR-T trial and is alive and well today, able to enjoy life with her 14-year-old daughter. There are many more Canadians like Camille who are thankfully still with us today because of the transformative work Biocanix has done. With the sunsetting of the Networks of Centers of Excellence program and the rapidly approaching end of our runway in March 2023, we're extremely concerned that we'll no longer be able to support the preclinical to clinical development at the pace and cost required to rapidly advance technologies to those that need it most, Canadian cancer patients. We urge the government to consider funding organizations that have a demonstrated track record in addressing an unmet real-world need in Canada. Biocanix is a current-day successful implementation of the government's biomanufacturing life sciences strategy for the development of cancer immunotherapies, and I would argue is a great model for building a Canadian moonshot program. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you to you both. We're grateful for your presentation. We're grateful for all of you being here. And now we'll go to President McBrearty. We're glad to have you back.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. It's a pleasure to once again appear before the House of Commons Standing Committee on Science and Research. I would like to begin by acknowledging that our operations at CNL take place on the unceded and unsurrendered traditional territories of numerous First Nations across Canada. At CNL, we recognize the unique history, spiritual beliefs, cultural practices, and languages of Indigenous people in Canada, and we appreciate the responsibility that they have as stewards of the environment. My remarks today seek to inform the committee's study of international moonshot programs. The topic that I want to discuss today is radiopharmacy or radioisotopes. As Canada's National Nuclear Laboratory, CNL and our predecessor, AECL, have a deep and profound history of innovation. The first nuclear reaction outside of the United States took place at the Chalk River Laboratories in 1946. And at one time, we were home to the most powerful research reactor in the world. That period was marked by ambition, and that pioneering work produced groundbreaking feats of engineering, leading to the dawn of an industry that today employs over 76,000 people, to the construction of Canadian-made nuclear reactors around the world, and to the delivery of over 1 billion treatments in the fight against cancer. What brought the United States to the moon is the same spirit that led us to explore the mysteries of the atom. National ambition, aggressive research and development, bold leadership, and perhaps most of all, a real sense of urgency. That competitive instinct that says we must be first. And when it comes to the research, production, and processing of medical isotopes, we, for many decades, have led the way in Canada. I do not think I am breaking any news to this committee when I say that over the years, that sense of urgency and purpose began to wane at the Chalk River Laboratories. And it wasn't until 2014, when we were given a new lease on life by the Government of Canada, that our scientists were once again able to aim higher and to think bigger. And we asked ourselves, what are we good at? And what will improve the lives of everyday Canadians? What will put us on the map again as a company that can change the world? What is our moonshot? Today, I am proud to say that CNL intends to win the global race to produce the rarest isotope on Earth, a compound known as actinium-225. Simply put, we intend to help cure cancer. It will come as no surprise to me if you have never heard of actinium-225. The isotope is so rare that the annual global production is less than a grain of sand. But its unique properties have also made it one of the most sought-after isotopes in the world. And at CNL, we recognize that we were one of the few companies that could produce it. Over the past 3 years, we have developed a small-scale generator which produces meaningful quantities of actinium for our studies and for our strategic partners. But we have bigger ambitions. We see an opportunity to build on our legacy in isotope production and processing, and we are now pursuing the construction of new facilities on or near our Chalk River campus that would establish a stable commercial supply for this valuable isotope. In fact, we have already signed a memorandum of understanding with a leading German biotech company as part of that effort. I want to be clear, this is an enormous undertaking, and it will not be easy. It means that we must raise hundreds of millions of dollars. It requires a deep network of partners and suppliers. And to be frank, it comes with risk. One of our competitors, TerraPower, is backed by Bill Gates. But as every Canadian knows, you miss 100% of the shots that you do not take. If I had any advice for Canada, it would be to apply the same approach to innovation on a larger national scale. It would be to leverage the strategic resources we have in this country, including our vast national laboratory network, and use them collectively to focus on big and bold issues of national importance, to once again pursue projects that seem to be out of the reach to us, to focus on what we do good as a nation, and unleash the scientific visionaries that we have in this country. It means making tough decisions and leaving some projects behind, and it comes with risk, both political and financial. And most of all, it requires urgency. So thank you once again for the opportunity to be here today. I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so very much. And I'd like to thank all of our witnesses. We're grateful for your time and your expertise and for joining with us. And we're now going to go to our members who are keen to ask you questions. This is a 6-minute round, and we begin with Mr. Tucker tonight.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to start with, we're going to talk a little bit about cancer with Biocan RX. Big supporter of pharmacological treatment for different disease states, including cancer. But changing gears a little bit on the cancer side, where would the treatment of cancer be without isotopes and or the diagnosis equipment that comes with nuclear science?
Well, I hate to admit it, but we'd be nowhere. I mean, we need to have the isotopes for imaging. There's a lot of kinds of therapy that are effective for cancer, especially if the disease is localized that require radioisotopes. I think the challenge in cancer, though, is that for most patients who come to the clinic who have what we call widespread or metastatic disease, treatments like that are really not going to help them, unfortunately. So we really have to try to find new approaches to really try to treat people who are the ones at greatest risk of dying, those with metastatic disease.
I encourage you to continue on your work with the moonshot aspect of things to hopefully find some additional cures and treatments for cancer. Thank you for being here tonight. Switching gears to CNL, Mr. McVitie, we're talking about moonshots, and I think you kind of outlined how you were somewhat created out of the moonshot need in 1946 to study nuclear and all the potential of nuclear. One of the aspects, I think, of missed opportunities is that how much of a leader we were in the nuclear field with CANDU. And can you unpack a little bit about the belief of what CANDU could have done for Canada? As much as it was a success story, I'm fearful that we've lost a little bit of the opportunity to encouraging more use of the CANDU reactor around the world.
Thank you very much for that question. And so let me frame it by putting some stuff in perspective. Today, there are 19 CANDU reactors operating safely, reliably in Canada across 2 provinces. There are, I think, 29 total CANDU reactors operating across the world. This is a reactor technology that was born out of AECL well back into the 1950s and 60s, which actually, took on a great need in the country. And it should not be lost on folks in Ontario that 60% of the electricity produced in this province comes from CANDU reactors. The reactors themselves are reliable, they are safe. They have demonstrated through the operation with OPG and Bruce Power very successful refurbishments to keep this technology operating and providing clean, reliable power over the last several decades. And it should be noted that these reactors were continuing to be produced even after the United States had stopped most reactor production and construction after 3 Mile Island. So the fact that you have safe, reliable reactors with CANDU is remarkable, just to say the least. But it has also allowed us to spur into another more advanced industry in small modular reactors, which both or three provinces, New Brunswick, Ontario, and Saskatchewan, are all becoming heavily invested in, because we know that you cannot solve the decarbonization problem with renewables alone. If you want to get off fossil fuels, you have to be able to use nuclear. That's an established fact.
Yes, and we've heard witnesses in the other study on SMRs that if we're going to meet our emissions targets, we have to have nuclear part of the mix. So I appreciate those comments. And earlier today, we heard testimony that research is slow. And maybe on the SMR side, as much as it's moving seemingly in the right direction, we have an announcement out of Ontario, which was very supportive last week, but it is slower on the SMRs. What can actually reduce the emissions, and we heard from other testimony today on the importance of reducing emissions, is the technology that's on the shelf. Would that technology be CANDU is what I'm kind of...
Certainly. The technology could be CANDU for large-scale nuclear production. It can be small modular reactors for more advanced or newer type production. I should remind everyone that the small modular reactor technology, for the most part, is existing technology that is present in the world today. But CANDUs are really the only large reactor designed in Canada that could provide a large amount of energy.
Thank you again. And just to clarify or give it a little bit more meat on the bone on the isotopes, can you explain quickly on the CANDU, what are we harvesting off of the CANDU today?
So today we are harvesting the isotope of most importance, I think, from the cancer perspective, is an isotope known as lutetium-177 that is being produced at the Bruce Power reactors. Lutetium-177 is a beta emitter, and similar to what I discussed with actinium, which is an alpha emitter, these beta emitters target specific cancer tumors cells.
Thank you very much. I believe I'm almost out of time, and I just want to pass along warm regards to everyone that works so hard at the CNL, and thank you so much for being here tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. And thank you again to all our witnesses. And with that, now we're going to go to Monsieur Lauzon for 6 minutes.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. First and foremost, I'd like to thank all of the witnesses here with us this evening. You made terrific opening speeches, very informative. My first question is for Mr. Guy Rouleau. Now, you've piqued our curiosity when you talked at length about artificial intelligence. And it's my understanding that there is a link between artificial intelligence and everything that occurs in people's brains. So I'd like to hear you elaborate on the kinds of technologies that could be used as part of artificial intelligence to address brain diseases. Response. Well, we have technologies that generate huge amounts of data. For example, a genome might cost a certain amount, a huge amount, and take much longer to produce results, and now it costs much less and the data is produced in one day. Artificial intelligence is nowadays the technology we use to analyze huge amounts of data in our laboratories. That is the main usefulness of artificial intelligence. We can process mass amounts of data that would otherwise be impossible to consider and study. So that's its main application in this context. It enables us to interpret data. AI can also be used to enhance diagnostic capabilities, and artificial intelligence has a huge place in medicine, in neuroscience in particular. I should also point out that the advantage of artificial intelligence in Canada focuses largely on the brain. There's a lot of back and forth between AI and neuroscience. A lot of the improvements to AI focus on using approaches that we learn through neuroscience. Now, the link between neuroscience and robots that are able to diagnose diseases as part of surgeries, they're very fine-tuned, and these are being used in the healthcare settings and might be used in more extensively in the future. In your opinion, could that kind of technology be perceived as a moonshot kind of program in Canada? Well, indeed, there is a lot of technology nowadays used for the purposes of surgery. There are some being developed in my institute. Now, this is indeed something that is worth exploring, envisaging as a moonshot. I'm not really an expert in that branch of medicine, but the question I ask myself, is there critical mass? To engage in a moonshot program, you need a critical mass of persons, the best and brightest in the world, and I'm not familiar with that community. Well, thank you. So, are the investments that our government is making in artificial intelligence adequate, and do we need to do better in that realm? Response. Well, honestly, one can always do better. And we have a lot of interaction with the promoters of artificial intelligence, which applies to just so many areas. It's a really burgeoning domain. Multiple sclerosis is being looked at by one team. Another team is developing algorithms to determine how to treat patients and what's actually going to happen to those patients. So we have our work cut out for us, and it's also very promising. We are also interested in AI when it comes to medical applications, of course. Thank you. Well, I have a quick question for Ms. Michaud, because I know my time is running out quite quickly. You spoke at length about luminotherapy, which is really revolutionary in terms of treatment. Is there a link between light therapy and prevention or the detection of cancers? Well, not in terms of detection and diagnosis, no. But when it comes to preventing cancers, well, here's what I can tell you. There have been clinical trials conducted in the United States only a couple of months ago on folks with colorectal cancer. Before they got any surgical treatment, they got light luminotherapy. And we're talking about a small sample of 14 individuals, and each and every one of them has enjoyed complete remission. Well, that's great. Mr. Bell, you referred to how important it is to detect cancers as early as possible. And sometimes there are clues to this, but with other cancers, there are very few indicators. How can we detect those cancers when there's nothing detected by MRI or X-ray in the pre-treatment phase?
I'm sorry for your time. Perhaps you could ask Dr. Bell for a written answer on that.
I will come back in the next round.
Okay, and then ask him. Okay. Thank you, Monsieur Lauzon. And now we will go to Monsieur Blanchet de Joncaire for 6 minutes.
Madame la Présidente, je salue.
Thank you. I'd like to say hello to the witnesses in this second panel. My first question is for Dr. Rouleau. You're the director of the Institut Hôpital Neurologique de Montréal. Your mission is to understand the brain, and your institution conducts research and provides care to patients and focuses on the next generation of physicians and researchers in neuroscience. And yours is the first institution to adhere to the principles of open science. Could you please elaborate on the principles of open science and how they bear fruit in the context of your professional activities? Well, that's that's an interesting question. As far as open science is concerned, and I want everyone to be on the same page, this is a philosophy of sharing everything in short order, data, knowledge, and I could talk about this for longer than 6 minutes, but I'll try and be concise. Essentially, we develop tools to be able to better share information of from all kinds of origins and sources, and we've worked with a lot of patients to develop a code of ethics. We've created a biobank that contains all of the information on the patients as well as biospecimens. And this is open source, and all researchers across the world can use it to study diseases. We've conducted a lot of outreach in-house to ensure that those folks are in fact adhering to the principles of open science, and we've gone to great lengths to convince other Canadian institutions to adopt an open source policy. There are 3 institutions that have adopted an open science policy in Canada, and there are no others anywhere in the world. So Canada is well ahead of everyone else worldwide in this realm. Thank you very much. Adhering to open science worldwide and in the context of research, could that play a transformative role? Could it be a catalyst in terms of developing a kind of a moonshot program, for example, in the future? Response, absolutely. Well, the proof is in the pudding. When COVID appeared, and we pivoted, and it was determined that all of the data and information would be shared very quickly in an open source manner. It didn't work perfectly because not all stakeholders shared the information, but the lion's share did. And it's thanks to that the world pivoted, and we turned on a dime and found ways of preventing and treating COVID-19. So yes, it did fast track the development of new medical treatments and a lot in other areas as well. Thank you very much. Are there other issues in terms of having that approach take hold? Why aren't there other institutions that have adhered to this open science formula thus far? Well, you know, I think they're following the dream of making a lot of money. Historically, conventionally, universities develop patents with a view to making money. But the fact is it just doesn't work, this approach. Universities are institutions that are there to conduct research and educate. They're not institutions with the main purpose of making profits. Companies play that role, and they're the ones with the expertise in profit making. Now, I think that's the major impediment, the major roadblock. People don't want to take up the mantle of open science because they believe that if I hide their data, they hide their research, they'll be able to make more money. But according to one study, it costs Canadian universities the same cost. In fact, the cost of all patents is, in fact, higher than the revenue that comes from licensings. Apparently, there are 3,000 patents in Canada for each and every new company that's created, so it's a very inefficient system. Thank you very much, Mr. Hullo. In the neuroscience field, is there a particular project that might benefit from a kind of ambitious moonshot program? Massive investments to support your research efforts in a particular field, a solution to a particular problem, or to make a particular major discovery. Response, I think there are 2 possibilities. Neurodevelopment. There are neurodevelopmental diseases that we're starting to get a handle on, and we can start to develop new treatments, and we can see this is just at the beginning stages. I think a moonshot kind of approach to that would help us find treatments to a whole lot of diseases like autism and neurodeficiencies. Those folks that have intellectual cognitive diseases could end up being productive in society were we able to help them in that manner. Thank you. Now, in order to treat dementia. There's a heavy investment in Canada in dementia. Now, if we had a moonshot kind of program to enhance treatments for dementia, I think that we could develop homegrown treatments for these crucial illnesses and diseases. We had Usha Bengio from the Artificial Intelligence Institution appear before us. Are there any partnerships between your two institutions underway? Yes, there's a lot of partnerships. I recruited some folks who work for that institute, and one of our neurological residents
Sorry to interrupt. I really have the worst job. I have to interrupt these interesting remarks. Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca, would you like a written response?
C'est bien, Madame la Présidente, c'est répondu à la question.
Yes, I got my answer. Thank you very much.
Okay, and now, dear colleagues, we will go to Mr. Cannings for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you, and thank you again for being here. Some of you I'm seeing for the first time in real life. I've been on Zoom with them, so it's good to have you here. I'm going to start with Dr. Rouleau, or continue on with Dr. Rouleau again. Canada does have this deep history in neuroscience, and so, like you said, we have a strong international presence in that field. And McGill seems to be the center of that. But you talked about the collaboration that Canada is also strong at. And I'm just wondering how broad that is across the country, how important it is. When I worked at UBC, there was studies on spinal cord research in zoology where I was. And I'm just wondering how broad those collaborations are and how connected Canadian researchers are versus connecting outside Canada to more international labs.
Yeah, so there's a lot of excellent neuroscience research being done in many, many places in Canada. So, I mean, McGill is strong. I thank you for mentioning that, but University of Toronto, Calgary, Halifax, many, many places. Over the past years, there's been a movement. There's two things that happened. One is there was a Canadian Neuroscience Society was created and has become a unifying force with a very very active meeting every year, and it includes everybody who does neuroscience in Canada who wants to be part of it. The second is there's something called the CBRS, the Canadian Brain Research Strategy Group, that brings together at least 30 different institutions that are involved in neuroscience research in Canada, and we meet regularly. We talk about what are issues in common and what are things that we need to do. The collaborations are established, and many of the different researchers work together. So I would say it is a very, very close group that work a lot together and work well together.
And the open science concept that you were talking of earlier, and you said that seem to be restricted to Canada, at least in neuroscience, or perhaps even small in that. How broad is that across the country? Is it shared by all these institutions, or is it just in your in McGill? How broad is that in Canada, and why is? I mean, well, I think you tried to answer why it isn't happening everywhere else in the world.
I do think that this notion of open science fits the Canadian philosophy, the way Canadians think. I think, I'm just saying what I think, much more socially driven and more wanting to work together. I mentioned the University of Calgary has their neuroscience group is called the Hotchkiss Institute, has joined the Neuro. And the Douglas Mental Health Research Institute has joined the Neuro. We have UBC. The Moafegian is working towards adopting open science. University of Western Ontario is working at Adopt Open Science. Multiple institutions in Toronto, the CAMH, the Baycrest, University Health Network. Quebec City has expressed interest. University of Montreal has expressed interest. Edmonton, is on board. So it's really it's blossoming into most, if not all, neuroscience research institutes and groups in Canada are coming on board. So there's very little resistance once you do the education and once people understand, they come on board.
Well,
and there's no such institution in the planet.
Okay.
Anywhere in the world.
Right. Okay, thanks. If I have 90 seconds. Okay, well, I'll turn to Biocan RX and talk about, one thing about these treatments is that I understand they're quite expensive, and I'm just wondering what a moonshot would do. Where are we with that trend of bringing those costs down to make it more, make it easier for provinces, to say we're going to cover those and cover more of it, because that does seem to be a big issue.
Maybe I'll just actually sort of in line with what Guy was just saying about the different models, new approaches, and we believe that there's a new approach for science, not only in discovery, as Guy's referring to, but also in translation. And so rather than fill the coffers of companies, we feel maybe a better approach is to use our treatments in Canada when not-for-profit type entities that we create. And then we actually make sure that the patients get treated, but also that the money that goes into that sort of organization gets put back into science. So I think that sort of complements the open science part that Guy was speaking about.
There's a very excellent opportunity. Oh, yes, it's on. Thank you. There's an excellent opportunity for Canada to capitalize on its existing bone marrow transplantation centres, and this is what we've done with the extension of our point-of-care manufacturing network, is to really roll out the manufacturing of expensive therapies like CAR T-cell across the country. And what we're able to do is actually significantly lower the cost of this product, while at the same time capitalizing on what is existing infrastructure.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I apologize. Thank you, Mr. Cannings. We appreciate, again, all our witnesses. And we will now go to the 5-minute round, and we have Mr. Ruff tonight.
Thanks, Chair, for having me. So I got a few questions, ideally for all three witnesses. First off, though, I do want to point out, Mr. Rouault, that I did kind of take issue with your first point about everybody having a brain. You are talking to a bunch of federal politicians, and the jury's still out on whether or not we actually meet that requirement. Look, my specific question to you and to Biocan RX is with respect to a specific incurable disease right now, diffuse intrinsic protein glioma, or glioма, DIPG as it's known, and is there any progress there? Is there something here? I know you're both talking about the moonshot here and how an investment, but here's a disease that I know is impacting youth across the country, not on large numbers, but it is incurable, and it's basically that death sentence for those families that find out. And I'm just wondering where your research is on specifically DIPG, if I could ask both Mr. Rouault and Biocan RX.
Yeah, maybe I can start. So I know this very well. There's a lot of research being done on that in Montreal and in Toronto. And there's even a company that's been created. It's been created in the open space. It's called M4K, Meds for Kids. That's working on development of a potential treatment for this disease. So it's a nice example of a rare, terrible disease where when we started understanding some of the biology, ideas appear as to how to find treatments for this disease.
Yeah, just to add to that, there is, out of California now, some, again, using the CAR T approach in this particular indication where they're seeing some promising activity in young kids suffering from it. So I think there are things happening, as Guy mentioned, and it's a lot of, I think, new opportunities. So it's time to be optimistic, although it's tough when you're right in the middle of it, for sure.
And is there anything we can do to sort of speed it up or to help advance it?
I think that, what we're all talking about is trying to find ways to create more cohesive research programs that will actually advance these sorts of new discoveries faster, and that's certainly one of the objectives of BioCanRx, but also of the Neuroscience Network, is trying to find ways to rapidly get our discoveries out of the test tube and into people, and that's really what I think we all think is the way to move forward.
Super. I think I'll move over to the nuclear side a little bit, and because it all is interlinked. But representing Bruce Grey Owen Sound, which a number of my constituents work at Bruce Power, and consider I'm subbing in for Mr. Lobb, who does represent that area. I think it's appropriate. Spent a number of years up in Petawawa in my previous career as well, so know the Chalk River area quite well. And look, I think it's some great news that you guys were, given that new lease on life by the Government of Canada in 2014, and I applaud you for everything you're doing. Canada is recognized as a world leader with our isotope technology, in particular what's coming out. And so I guess could you just expand a little bit on sort of the medical isotopes and not only this actinium-225 that you're focused on, but just what percentage of the market is sort of global market, and how you guys are leading the way for Canada in this field?
Great, thanks very much for that question. Now, I'm not sure I can give you an exact figure on the percentage of the global market. Right now, I would say it's actually fairly small in probably the lutetium-177 area. In the alpha therapies, which I mentioned, which is the actinium, we're really just on the cusp of starting to get companies involved in this. Right now, we are still very much in preclinical trials. So when we look at the actual amount of material that's out there, as I said, it's very small. And so one of the issues that we have in actually being able to advance further development of these treatments is getting enough material so that the industry or the clinicians can actually be ready to use it. So I know I have just a couple of seconds here. So we believe that Canada has the opportunity between not only Bruce Power and the reactors at Bruce Power and OPG, but also CNL, to be able to take over the radioisotope leadership in the world. I think the talent is here. The production capabilities are here, and the urgency is here as well.
Thank you.
And we're glad you've joined us tonight. And now we will go to Monsieur Lauzon for 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. I'd like to continue with Ms. Michaud and Mr. Bell. It's interesting what we're talking about, detecting metastasis and the difficulties in detecting them. How can one use research and development, and how can that kind of technology get more funding? You were cut off mid-stride, so if you could perhaps continue your response.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the earlier detection, the better. Everybody knows that's the case. And for some cancers, that's fairly straightforward to do. But for many, as you say, they're silent. We don't know the answer. But what's happening is people are starting to use, back to your original point about artificial intelligence, using that kind of computing power to analyze samples from patients in a much more sophisticated way. And for instance, we look for what's called circulating tumor DNA, which may be in your blood. It'd be a very, very early marker of cancer. And so that sort of stuff is starting to happen now, and applying artificial intelligence to deconvolute some of these things and make them possible.
Does that technology, that is artificial intelligence, could it help provide data on the way people eat, the kinds of foods that they eat that might contribute to the development of a cancer? For example, preservatives that are found in a lot of foods. Can some data be derived through artificial intelligence that would be helpful?
Potentially. I think, to your point, it's complex, obviously. Our diet's very complex, and so using something like artificial intelligence, which has the computing power to begin to deconvolute these things, potentially that could be used in a larger population study to say this particular population eats a particular kind of food and this one doesn't. And so that sort of stuff could come out of it, I imagine.
Well, you're really getting me thinking here, because this is highly complicated. We've got our work cut out for us. We've got a long way to go. I represent rural areas and producers and farmers, and there are new fertilizers that's being developed. It's been discovered that some products are more dangerous to health, and that also had an impact on animals, and that nutrition comes into play too. And there's even an increase in cases of cancer possibly due to food. Could you potentially end up working with our farmers and work with people in the supply chain?
I think so, for sure. I mean, that makes a lot of sense, actually. My son's actually a scientist as well, and he works with farmers all the time trying to understand a different aspect to it. So I think totally it's a viable pathway forward, for sure.
Yeah, okay. Bon, j'ai une autre question.
I do have another question, Mr. Rouleau. You spoke at length about high-level collaboration, and you focused on and alluded to the fact that, unlike in other fields, in your particular field, you recruit a lot from the United States. Now, could you explain what attracts this talent from the United States? It's clearly not our cold winters, is it? So how do you attract this talent? Response. Let me give you a concrete example. There's a superstar from Yale. That woman was given the position of a directorship of an institution in Germany with a $100 million budget. And when we invited her to Canada, she said, well, I'd like to come to Canada. And I said, why? And she said, well, it would cost me $100 million to build what you already have in terms of neuroscience. And yours is a very collaborative community. So she's coming to Canada because she's attracted by our infrastructure, our human resources, and to get together with her colleagues here. I met with another individual, a rising star from New York, and he also wants to come to Canada, and I asked him why too. And he said it's a place where folks collaborate, cooperate, it's not competitive like in the US, and Canada's a place where I'll have all the equipment and colleagues I need to engage in the best science possible. So when you have critical mass, when you have quality, you can attract stellar and star candidates. Now, another question. I have about 30 seconds left. You're at the pinnacle of the nuclear field, and do you focus a lot on lithium to provide a future in healthcare?
That's the end. Perhaps
a written response. I'd like to know more about that. Lithium, that is. Lutetium, sorry.
And now if we could go, Monsieur Blanchet-Jean-Cap for 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson. My questions will be for Biocan Erics. A pleasure to see you in person. Ms. Richaud, in 2016, the National Cancer Institute launched an ambitious initiatives to combat cancer, and Joe Biden in February 2022 announced ambitious objectives to reduce the mortality rate by 50% in the United States over the next quarter century. How can we model ourselves on what's going on in the US? Response. There's a lot of ways of doing this. For example, provide support for translational research here in Canada. It's not being subsidized here. There aren't grants, and we subsidize bioproduction through to the clinical stage. But we really need to take advantage of the data we get from our labs and transform that data in products that can be trialed on human beings and potentially heal them. That's absolutely crucial. We must do this in Canada in order to even begin to start discussions with our European, UK and American counterparts. Having a major endeavour like treating all cancers and make these cancers curable, that is our grand vision in our organisation. Thank you very much, Ms. Michaud. Now, to pursue your mission, there's been investments over recent years, and unfortunately there are no longer investments in biomanufacturing and in the humanities. What about investments in recent years from the federal government? Is it enough to support you and help you develop and meet your mission statement? Unfortunately, the program that we got grants for was slashed in December 2018, so there is no longer any program. In fact, there's a strategic science fund, and we made an application under that fund, but we're waiting for a response. But our funding will conclude in March 2023. Ms. Michaud, could you please tell us consequently what the ramifications are on your organisation if you don't get funding? Well, we'll have to shut down part of our clinical trials. Thank you very much. Now, what progress has been made in research on cancer Moonshot, launched in 2016 in the United States. In 2016 in the United States, there was so much success.
I'm sorry, I've got to be fair. Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca, would you like a written response?
Yes, please, indeed.
Thank you for all being very understanding. And we'll go to Mr. Cannings to finish off the 2.5 minutes, please.
Well, I'd just like to allow Ms. Michaud and Dr. Bell to finish that thing. How can Canada compete with the United States and Europe? You said they were treating this seriously as a moonshot, and what the federal government should be doing to help that.
Both the United States and Europe have expressed very, very bold visions with respect to what it is that they wish to accomplish. I would state that our vision also is very highly lauded in that we're looking to effectively bring cures to Canadian patients. This is something that we are currently doing in terms of advancing CAR-T therapy right here in Canada, and taking a very Canadian approach in ensuring that all Canadians are able to access these types of therapies. Both Europe and the United States have put forward incredible amounts of monies. To go back to Monsieur Blanchet-Jonca's question with respect to what has been accomplished, the advancement of immunotherapies is an outcome of the 2016 Vice President Biden moonshot. It is an incredible new arrow in our quiver in the treatment of cancer, and one where I believe we will be able to see massive advances being realized, and certainly the Europeans and the US probably able to achieve their objectives. I'd like to say the same for Canada.
A minute.
Well, I'll go back to Dr. Rouleau again then. And this may be a very unfair question, but if you had to pick one moonshot for neuroscience in Canada, you mentioned dementia, you mentioned developmental diseases, maybe they're related, but if you had to pick one, which one do you think Canada could accomplish with what we have now, with the people we have now, and how should we?
So neurodegenerative diseases, dementia and Parkinson's disease. They're very highly related.
Okay. That's fine then.
Thank you, Mr. Cannings. You're always very gracious. Dear colleagues, that we've reached the end of our time here. I'd like to thank all our witnesses. It's a real privilege to be able to listen to you and to hear your expertise and the work you're doing for Canadians and for the country. And we thank you all. We're going to suspend, and then we're going to go into camera. Thank you all. Suspended.